Hey, this is week 3 of our cereal series, our series on cereal, if you will. The first week we looked at a cereal offense and the reality of what happens when we go expecting one thing and we receive quite another. And how that's a reflection on many times in our own life. We go looking for different behavior, or we have hopes that we're going to behave differently and then we don't. Or we see that happen when people come to us and our behavior is not what it should be or what it could be. And the reality of that is we're not being transformed and made in the image of Christ. And we struggle with that greatly. I struggle with that greatly. And in a few weeks, we're going to start a brand new series, which I'm super excited about, on particular things that we need to start doing. And one of the ways we're doing this in this series right now is starting some daily Bible reading plans and some opportunities. All right, so that's number one, a cereal offense. Last week we looked at a cereal formula and this overview of how we need to begin to take and exercise our mind and our body and our will, our heart, our soul, our spirit, our social life, and begin to harness those things together to pursue after the reality of God's presence and to anticipate and notice the reality of God's presence in our life. And once again, the next series we're going to do is really going to build upon that. But today we're going to look at another one, and it's a cereal opportunity. And so it's just real overview stuff, but I hope it'll challenge each and every one of you guys. One of the realities of cereal is this: cereal works for everything. Now, some of you may not like cereal, so you're not going to like what I have to say next. But for my wife and my children, many of my children, this is true. Cereal can be a meal. It can be a meal. You put milk in it. Cereal can be a meal. Cereal can be a snack. If it's the right kind of cereal, it can even serve as a dessert. You can serve it with milk. You can put it in a bowl, use a spoon. You can put it in a cup and just eat it with your fingers. You can put it in a Ziploc bag and carry it with you and eat it in the car. You can serve it with some toast in the morning and pour a cup of juice, and it's a meal. But cereal is very versatile. And so in our lives, what I want us to just think about today is how we're ingesting good things. Things that point us to God, things that will help us know and experience God's presence on a daily basis. So just like cereal can be experienced at any time and you have tons of opportunities to eat it if it's the right kind of cereal, so too we should pursue after God's presence in everything that we use and consume. We should pay attention to who we follow on social media. We should pay attention to the music that we listen to. We should question whether our reading or our TV choices, our viewing choices point to hope in pursuit of what is good, or if they're simply centered around self-satisfaction and self-promotion. And just let me give you a quick thought on music, since we've talked about it the last 2 weeks. Simply calling something Christian music doesn't, number one, necessarily make it Christian, and number two, it certainly doesn't make it good music. It may not even be good to listen to. It may not be helpful for us to listen to. And then there's the other side of music and Christian music, and we say, well, that Christian music, while it claims to be Christian, isn't really Christian because that group has issues or problems or whatever, and we shouldn't listen to their kind of music. And I'm not going to even say I understand that. I disagree. Most churches I know of would not have a single problem standing up and singing "A Mighty Fortress is Our God." And yet the person who wrote that, Martin Luther, once said that the best way to kill a heretic was with a sword. That was his officially approved method for killing a heretic. And who was a heretic to Martin Luther? Well, Baptists were. You know why? Because they baptized people twice. If an adult said they had placed their faith and trust in Jesus Christ as God's Son, they would baptize them as an adult. But Martin Luther said they had been baptized as a child and they shouldn't be baptized again. He also was willing to sentence them for punishment for not baptizing their children. Now, why do we sing "A Mighty Fortress is Our God"? Because it's good. Because it's lasted. Not because Martin Luther wrote it, because Martin Luther, just like every other human in the world, had great problems in his teachings and stuff, all right? So I say all that because we get into this conversation sometimes, and I know especially with some of my older students, they hear these things and they're not quite sure what to do. I'll say this: follow your parents' leadings, because that's who you have right now. That's who God's gifted you with. But don't limit yourself to just that view. And so let me just give you some idea here. When we start talking about a serial opportunity, it's this. Our lives, while we may have great crucial moments, that's not how our lives are formed. That's not how God works. Look at creation itself. Creation itself speaks to day-to-day growth, regular rainfall, those sorts of things. You know, if you had an orange tree that you were trying to get to grow, would it be better to go and pour 5 gallons of water on it for one day out of the week, or would it be better to water it a gallon a day? Depending on the tree, more than likely a gallon a day. So too in our lives, God has made us to receive incremental things. And so incrementally, a serial opportunity, we should be taking in good things. And here's where I want to say that. Let me give you some real life application here. As adults, we can be really short-sighted. Now, first of all, if you're a kid, you're watching this, you're a student, you know, the apps you can use are the ones that your parents have approved, period. That's just it. That's the way, and I would support them in that. But I want to just say something. There is good on TikTok. There is great content. There is God-honoring content on TikTok. There is good God-honoring content on Snapchat. There is good God-honoring content on Instagram, on Twitch. You name the platform, it's there. It really is. And I know some of you guys right now, I know what you're thinking of, not on such and such platform. It is. Now, you don't need to go there looking for it, because why would you dig through the mud to find something when it's laying on something right there on the table? But the point is, there's good content out there. And you and I, if you're on those platforms, here's why I say that. If you're on those platforms, then make sure that the people that you're following are some of those who are producing this good content. If you want to go on those platforms and you're part of those and you're allowed to do so, then make sure you're taking in good things while you're on those platforms. Think about this. If you walk into your kitchen today and there's a bowl of bran flakes and there's a bowl of Cocoa Puffs, which one are you going to eat? You're going to eat the Cocoa Puffs because it's good for you. Now, granted, we might say the bran flakes is better, and that's a whole other illustration for another time. But the point I'm trying to make is this. You recognize the good and you eat it. Well, on those platforms, you too can learn to recognize the good and consume them. If you're on those platforms, find the good and consume it, okay? Now, one of the ways we've been doing this for the last couple of weeks, or at least I've been trying to, but I'm just going to say to my students, this is to my guys and girls right now, I think this past week we had 7 sign up for our Bible reading plan. And that basically tells me that, maybe we're not making the effort to consume the good things, to plan to do the good things. So let's talk about what makes something good. Is it helpful? Is it encouraging? Is it good for the group? Does it elevate or promote God's faithfulness? And so we're going to go to a well-known passage in Philippians, and we'll read a couple of verses, and then we're going to briefly talk through what that might look like in our lives. Philippians chapter 4, Paul says this, "Rejoice in the Lord always. I will say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, tell God what your needs are. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." And then he says this, and this is our focus today. "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about these things." Think on these things. "Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you." So Paul writes to the Philippians, and he's kind of wrapping up this letter to them. And his challenge to them as he wraps it up is, look, there's a lot of things out there you could be doing, but let's focus on the good things you could be doing. And so I want us to just think about this. There's 2 basic keys. Number 1, embrace every day. And he starts out by saying, rejoice in the Lord always. We have a tendency to think and allow for things to happen at certain times, like maybe Sunday is church day, or maybe Wednesday is church day, and that's our consumption of all of our religious teachings on who God is. We cram it all into 30 minutes, 45 minutes, or an hour, whatever it might be. But you know what? We need to embrace every single day, and we need to let the opportunity of God's truth to be present with us every single day, whether that's a verse of the day on your phone, whether that's the daily Bible reading plan that we're promoting, or different things. You and I need to consume that daily, or we're going to miss the reality of God's presence in our life. God will still be present, but we're going to miss it. We're going to miss out on the opportunity to see where he is at work and to realize his faithfulness for us. Okay. Number 2, admit the pressures that every day brings. Monday's bad because it's this. Tuesday's bad because it's this. Wednesday, Thursday. We can have a reason why every day is bad and why every day brings its own pressure. That's the reality of our lives. That will never change. You can get old, it still won't change. And then here's the thing that we want to focus on really quickly. Ingest the good. Ingest the things that are true and valid. Okay. The things that work. The things that are valid. In other words, not the things that are malicious, not the things that are hateful, not the things that are abusive, but the things that are trustworthy. Okay, so number 1, invest the things that are trustworthy. Number 2, ingest the things that are worthy of respect. In other words, what is worthy of respect? Something that's good for everyone, something that's helpful for everyone. If you're ingesting media that is constantly mocking or belittling or trying to abuse others, then it's going to be a problem for you. And it's going to be a problem for me if I'm doing the same thing because I'm not thinking about what is good. And I'm going to miss the reality of God's presence in my life, and I'm going to miss the opportunity to show his love and compassion because I am focusing on belittling others or mocking others. And teenagers, we really got to watch that. And we really got to make sure we're not a part of that, okay? So, secondly, things that are noble. Thirdly, things that are right. In other words, things you can present to God. Things that you can say, this is the correct way of doing things. This is the right behavior here. And this was the right choice. So ingest in that. Find good stories. Read good stories. Follow people on your social media accounts, and you're consuming it and I'm consuming it. Follow people on those social media accounts that are sharing good stories about things that are good, things that are done right. Maybe it's a place where someone has gone through and created disruption or confusion, and the person coming along behind them is making it right. They're trying to pave the way, they're trying to reconcile, they're trying to befriend those who have no friends, whatever it may be. Find that. Fourthly, find something that is pure. What does it mean to be pure? It means without a secondary motive. Okay, being pure is without a secondary motive. For example, if I put out this video, and I put it out for my guys and girls in my group, and I do, then I have one potential level of desire for it. That's it. Whatever happens after that, that's what happens, okay? And so that's one of the ways I can check whether or not I'm being pure in the way I teach is what is my intents for what happens with the stuff that I present to you all. So what is it? Is there a secondary motive to it, or is this just it? So ingest in those things. Then look for the beauty around you. Whoever you are, whatever kind of art it is that appeals to you, ingest that. If you love looking at landscapes, man, you ought to have, if you're on Instagram, you ought to be following landscape photographers. If you love beautiful beaches or whatever it is, you ought to be following people that are publishing and posting that stuff because it's going to minister to you. Lovely things, the things that God created are things that are going to minister to our spirit. And then the things that are admirable and praiseworthy. Somebody's doing and somebody's serving, somebody's caring, somebody's compassionate. You find that clip, you find that video maybe of that softball team that picks that girl up and carries her around the bases. Ingest that sort of stuff. You find that person who realizes they found money that was lost and they go to return it to the rightful owner. Ingest in that stuff. That's admirable, that's praiseworthy. We need to think and focus on the good things. And so Jesus has a story about how this works out. Jesus goes up on top of the mountain with 3 of his disciples, Peter, James, and John. They're gone for a while. And they go up on top of this mountain, and that's a whole story in and of itself. But they come down, and as they come down, there's a disturbance. Now, this is really cool because Moses goes up on top of the mountain for 40 days, and he comes down, and he and Joshua find a disturbance in the camp. And these stories have a ton of parallels. But anyways, Jesus comes down, and he finds this father with his son. And Jesus basically says, what's the problem? And the disciples are like, we got one bad dude over here. And the dad's like, my son is ill and he's got these problems, and I brought him to your disciples because, y'all are supposed to be able to do something about this. And them sorry jokers couldn't do anything. And Jesus looks at his disciples and he just calls them out. And he says, you just don't have any faith. You just have little faith. You don't have any faith. And the point of that is, Jesus had been encouraging that group of disciples, that was 9 of them, to do the things that he was doing, to spend time in prayer, to spend time with the Father. And evidently those disciples had not been doing it, or had not been doing it to the extent that they could do and handle this situation that presented itself. You and I, every day in our lives, we're presented with things. We're presented with realities, we're presented with problems, we're presented with circumstances. And I gotta tell you, I fail so many times, and I can look back and say, you know what? I've not been faithful to ingest what is good. I've thought of myself instead of others. I've consumed things that promote me and not things that encourage others. So my challenge for you guys is this: take cereal as your illustration. Think of all the ways and all the times that you eat it. And then think of ways that you can consume the goodness of God's mercy and God's nature and God's compassion, and do that same thing in your life so that you can be ready when the opportunity comes to realize and recognize and act upon God's presence. I'll see you next time.